Hello, this is Craig Merriweather, host of the Mastermind Show. Even though there is a lot of awareness and a lot of medication, depression, anxiety, and attention deficit disorder is on the rise in both children and adults. And now research seems to indicate that there is a link between all three. Well, today I'm talking to one of the foremost experts on depression, anxiety, attention deficit disorder, and brain health, Dr. Daniel Amen. Dr. Amen is a physician, double board certified child and adult psychiatrist, and 8-time New York Times bestselling author. He is widely regarded as one of the world's foremost experts on applying brain imaging science to everyday clinical practice. Dr. Amen is founder and medical director of Amen Clinics, which are found in California, Washington, Virginia, Atlanta, and New York City. Amen Clinics have the world's largest database of functional brain scans related to behavior, totaling more than 80,000 scans on patients from 90 countries. Dr. Amen is a distinguished fellow of the American Psychiatric Association and is the lead researcher on the world's largest brain imaging and rehabilitation study on professional football players. His research has not only demonstrated high levels of brain damage in players, he also showed the possibility of significant recovery for many with the principles that underline his work. Dr. Amen is the author of over 30 books, including Change Your Brain, Change Your Life, Magnificent Mind at Any Age, Healing Anxiety and Depression, and Healing ADD. Now, Dr. Amen is really busy, so it is a real coup to get him for the show. Now, if you're not there already, please go to Dr. Amen's interview webpage at mastermindshow.com/Amen, A-M-E-N, to find out more information about his books, programs, and his clinic, as well as how to find him on Facebook and Twitter. Now, between depression, anxiety, and ADD, there's a lot to cover, and we have a limited amount of time with Dr. Amen. So here's my promise to you, that we'll give you as much information as we can in the time that we have together, and if at the end you want to take it further and deeper, Dr. Amen will tell you how. This interview comes from a special series on depression I put together called the End Depression Now Telesummit, which features over 40 experts teaching you the facts, exploding the myths, and revealing the scientifically proven methods for eliminating depression. You can find more information about the series by going to mastermindshow.com/Amen, A-M-E-N, and clicking the link on that page, or just go to depression180.com/telesummit. That's depression180, the number is 180.com/telesummit. Now here's my interview with Dr. Amen. All right, hello, Dr. Amen. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, it seems that anxiety and depression are best friends forever. They seem to be linked and go with one another. But it also seems that more people with ADD have depression than the national average. Are these three things kind of one of the same thing, or do they just kind of link together somehow?
They're not the same thing. They're different, but they commonly run together. And with ADD comes demoralization and failure year after year, which can clearly lead to depression. It can also lead to more issues with substance abuse, more high-risk behaviors that get people into trouble with things like brain injuries. And so behavioral issues can clearly be secondary to ADD.
Well, a lot of people believe that depression, anxiety, ADD, they're just kind of something that happens in the mind, and if you could just, get a hold of yourself, or you could just, snap out of it somehow, that everything would be all right.
Yeah, that's one of the most common myths. Try harder. If only you tried harder, you would do better. But our brain imaging work has taught us that, in fact, the harder people try, the worse it gets. So at the Amen Clinics, we've been evaluating and treating people for 25 years. And what we have found through the imaging work that we do, when people with ADD try to concentrate, they get decreased activity in the front part of their brain. And that part of your brain should turn on when you try to use it. And in fact, when it turns off, it means the harder people with ADD try, the worse it gets.
Well, it seems like everybody now is being diagnosed. Of course, I'm exaggerating, but there's a lot of talk that maybe ADD is being overdiagnosed. When I was growing up, you just were kind of hyper and you were sent out to go play. Now it seems that a lot of kids that I know are being put on medication. Is it being overdiagnosed?
Well, I actually think it is being overdiagnosed and underdiagnosed. So when you look at the statistics, they're actually quite horrifying. 20% of high school boys in New York have been diagnosed with ADD, 11% of girls. And it's gone up 50% in the last decade. And so it's easy to say it's overdiagnosed. But what we see at our clinics, it tends to be underdiagnosed in girls because they don't tend to have as many behavior problems. And it's underdiagnosed in introverted, inattentive ADD boys. Now, having said that, there are a lot of causes of ADD, and if you begin to address the causes, you'll see the numbers drop dramatically. Many people with ADD are sensitive to certain foods, whether it's food dyes, food additives, gluten, dairy, corn, soy. And one of the interventions is often to put them on an elimination diet. There are 2 studies from Holland show that more than 70% of kids on that diet significantly had a reduction in their symptomatology. Pesticide exposure has been found to be one of the causes, as can brain trauma. Although those of us who've been treating people with ADD for a long time clearly know that the most common cause is it's genetic. It runs in families. And if that's true, which I'm fairly certain it is, ADD kids, ADD women have their babies younger than non-ADD women because of the impulsivity and the excitement-seeking behavior. Teenage pregnancy is much higher in ADD kids, and if you have your babies younger, you tend to have more of them. And if that just happens over a couple of generations, pretty soon you'll see it significantly increase in the population.
Okay, so if this is genetic, then if you're seeing an ADD kid, or partially genetic, some cases being genetic, if you're seeing an ADD kid in your house, there's a good chance that you also have ADD as a parent. If
we see an ADD child, we look for it in parents. And if we can't find it in mom or dad, we look to see if the kid looks like the parents, thinking maybe they got switched at birth. It's really that genetic.
Wow. Okay, well, as kids get into teenage years, they start maybe losing focus, the hormones are raging, maybe they have some anxiety in their life, they start having those automatic negative thoughts, you're not good enough, they're getting bad grades. How do you know if it's just massive anxiety as a parent? How do you know if it's just you're dealing with anxiety, you're dealing with depression, or you're dealing with ADD? Maybe it's a mixture of all three. If you work with one, do the other 2 go away kind of deal?
No, I mean, somebody who really understands ADD is able to tell the difference. So, for example, I think of really 5 hallmark symptoms with ADD: short attention span, distractibility, disorganization, problems with poor follow-through and procrastination, and impulse control issues. Most people have anxiety. I mean, they may have problems concentrating because of their anxiety, but they actually tend to be fairly organized, and they're early rather than late, and they're more anxious, therefore usually less impulsive. So you really look at that symptom cluster over a long period of time, where depression tends to be more cyclical, ADD tends to be more stable. Now, at the human clinics, we use imaging to help us diagnose and treat our patients. But a long time ago, I realized not everybody can get a scan. So based on thousands of scans, we developed online questionnaires that people can take to know what type they have and then specifically what to do for it. And one of the things that we discovered is ADD is clearly not one thing in the brain, that it's 7 different things, and knowing your type is really important. And there's a type that goes with depression we call limbic ADD. There's another type that goes with anxiety we call anxious ADD. But it's not ADD if you're just depressed or you're just anxious. Those are separate problems. What it is, you have to have, 3 out of those 5 hallmark symptoms: short attention span, distractibility, disorganization, procrastination, impulse control in order to be sort of in the ADD world.
Well, what I find so interesting about ADD kids that I know, it seems like they can concentrate on stuff that they're into, whatever that be, whether they're into sports or music or video games or whatever. They can concentrate for a long time if they're enjoying the process. It's the things that they're not so interested in, that they're bored with, that their mind starts to wander.
Well, that's the one thing, actually, that fools most people, is that for things that are new, novel, highly stimulating, interesting, or frightening, people with ADD can pay attention just fine, because those things have their own internal adrenaline or stimulation. Research has shown that people with ADD have low levels of the stress hormone adrenaline. So I think of ADD as adrenaline deficit disorder. So what you find is what really is erratic attention. For things they love, they're fine. But for most things, regular, routine, everyday things, homework, paperwork, chores, they really struggle a lot. And so you find that they become excitement or conflict seeking in order to pay attention. So these are people who run with the bulls. It's like, what idiot would run with the bulls? You know, it's just such a stupid thing to do. But, you know, it makes them feel alive. These are people who love scary movies. You know, I often wondered, why did we need both the dawn and the night of the living dead? These are people who love driving fast and love a good argument. And so you see that conflicts tends to follow that, and it's like unconsciously they set it up. And I've seen this over and over again. And having raised three ADD kids, my little one, she used to run up to her older brother, kick him as hard as she could, run away laughing. And if he didn't chase her, she would go kick him again. And it's just, you know, they play this game I call let's have a problem. Because, and many mothers have said, if we have a really bad morning at home, he has a good day at school. And if we have a good morning at home, it's peaceful, warm, loving, happy, he has a bad day at school. And, you know, I mean, you have to ask yourself, why would a stimulant like Ritalin calm down a hyperactive child? How does that make any sense? But what happens is the stimulant works to stimulate the brain, and the brain calms you down. I mean, in large part, your brain is the big break in your head that tells you to stop doing things.
Well, then what's a parent to do if you need your kid to have a great day at school? So do you purposely start arguments in the morning?
Well, that's one strategy. It's not one that I would recommend. No, I think we have to find natural ways to get them the stimulation that they need. And so the first thing is you start the day with protein, because protein actually helps to boost dopamine, the neurotransmitter that is most involved in focus and concentration. Exercise works. So, you know, if you can get them up early and go for a walk, boy, that'll set a good tone for the rest of the day. There's a certain type of fish oil, EPA, one of the omega-3 fatty acids that has been found to be helpful for most types. And so you really look toward natural ways to optimize the brain. And if diet, exercise, simple supplements are not effective, then you think about medication. Because, you know, I think of medication like glasses for people who can't see. That withholding glasses from someone who can't see is clearly neglect. And when the interventions don't work, the natural interventions don't work, medication can be so helpful.
Okay, well, this brings up a point. If ADD is genetic in some people, and ADD, people with ADD thrive on conflict and loving a good argument, and your child is ADD and the parents are ADD, this creates quite the hurricane within the house if they need that constant conflict to get that adrenaline rush going. How do you calm down a household that's full of ADD people?
You treat them all. I mean, it makes a radical difference. So I have a new show on public television coming out early next year called Healing ADD that I did with my wife. And in the show, I talk about this 14-year-old girl who was cutting herself, failing in school, and really had terrible judgment. She was Xeroxing inappropriate body parts and then got suspended. And and then she ran away, which is when I saw her. And, we scanned her. Clearly she had low frontal lobe activity. And on the interventions, she just made a radical positive shift from D's and F's to A's and B's. And then I saw her brother, who had inattentive ADD, who got radically better. And then I saw her father. He knew they got it from him. And then I saw the father's father. And as they all got better, you can just imagine their holiday dinners were better. The house was significantly calmer. And, it's why I love treating people who have ADD, because when you do the right diagnosis and the right plan, you can make a radical difference. The problem is, though, everybody who gets diagnosed with ADD gets put on a stimulant, Vyvanse, Adderall, Ritalin, Concerta, and they help 2 of the 7 types, but they make 5 of the other types worse. And being a psychiatrist, I tend to see the people who struggle the most. Most family doctors or pediatricians take care of the easy people. The hard ones come to us. And what we found, it's just clearly not one thing. And that some kids who give them Ritalin makes a radically positive difference. Another child wants to kill somebody or kill himself on a stimulant. And we just saw that there are very clear scan patterns associated with the 7 different types. And so knowing that type of ADD can really make a very positive difference.
Well, you mentioned suicide, and with ADD being such an impulse-driven brain disorder, parents really have to look out for things like suicide and running away and kids driving too fast, because they're not thinking straight. They might actually think killing themselves is a good idea.
Suicide is commonly associated with ADD, especially when it's mixed with depression. And it's very important to, what I often see is the things that lead up to a suicide attempt: chronic failure, the loss of an important relationship or a job. At some point there was a head injury in the past, and their issues was alcohol. And when you combine that, and it's not uncommon, which is why I'm not a huge fan of playing football for kids, especially ADD kids, because they're already starting with low frontal lobe function. But what we often see is when there's a suicide attempt, you can look back and you can see these factors, and they're not uncommon. Brain injuries are really common. Substance abuse is really common. Failure in ADD, 33% of kids with ADD never finish high school. And so, too often one of the myths is ADD is no big deal. It's just a minor disorder. It's made up by the drug companies that want to sell more drugs. And, people sort of blow it off as like a minor thing. When you understand the fallout from untreated ADD, it's really can be a big deal.
Well, one thing I heard you say that I found really fascinating is that ADD kids, and maybe even adults can be thrown in here, they seem to be 5 years behind emotionally. So if you have an 18-year-old and you're ready to throw them out of the house because you're so frustrated, and they're 18 and technically an adult, they still may be operating at a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old emotional level.
That's really important to understand, that because of either delayed maturation in their brain or the lack of attention or the chronic stress and failure, they do tend to be emotionally 3 to 5 years behind. And it helps parents so much to just think of it that way, so that when you think, look, this 12-year-old that shouldn't have to be watching his homework every day, but you probably do that for an 8-year-old. Or, this person's 16, he wants his license, but emotionally it's really acting like he's 13. And you would never give a 13-year-old their license. And, he's 18 and, he's acting up. It's like, okay, I'm throwing him out of the house. I'm tired of being this kid's parent. But you wouldn't throw a 13-year-old out. And if they're 18 and they're acting like they're 15, you would never send them away to school. And often we see big problems occur when ADD kids who've had, say they have like this great mom who's really good at supervising him or her, and now all of a sudden they're in a dorm, and they're the ones that are gravitating toward the bad food, toward the alcohol, premature sex. They're not sleeping well, they're chronically stressed, and then we often see things like a suicide attempt. So it's a really important issue for teenagers, their parents, and clearly adults who have it.
Well, you've mentioned brain scans a couple of times in the interview, and I've mentioned it in your bio. Is this something that we just can go down to our general practitioner and get our brain scanned? Is that like an MRI kind of thing?
Well, more and more. We first started we do a study called brain Spect imaging, SPECT, and Spect looks at blood flow and activity. It looks at how your brain works. And there's about 30 of us around North America who do it. Amen Clinics has 6 clinics, 3 on the East Coast, 3 on the West Coast. We have more experience than anyone in the world. I think scans are really helpful for complicated people. So the simple ones, taking the questionnaire, reading my book, Healing ADD, can be really helpful. The more complicated people, I think getting a scan is really important, because how would you ever know what's going on in someone's brain, really, unless you actually looked? And so the scans act like radar and can help us map a trail to health. And without a scan, you really don't know, is it classic ADD, is it head trauma, is it toxic exposure, does their brain work too hard, not hard enough? We published 2 really important studies, and one of them was if you get a scan, it changes what the doctor does 8 times out of 10, because he has more information. And our outcomes at Amen Clinics are better than anyone who publishes outcome studies because we have more information. So on average, our patients are complicated. They have 4.2 diagnoses. They failed 3.3 people and 6 medications. And at the end of 6 months, 75% of our complicated patients are better across all measures. 85% their quality of life went up. So we're really excited about our ability to use the imaging to help guide treatment. The other thing that scans do is they really they give people brain envy. That people start caring about their brains after they see their scan. So if they're smoking pot, they tend to stop. If they're drinking too much, they tend to stop. If they're hitting soccer balls with their head, they tend to stop. Because they start caring about their brain, and nobody cares about their brain. Why? Because you can't see it. I say psychiatrists, we are the only medical specialists that never look at the organ that we treat, and that's nuts. Cardiologists look, neurologists look, every other medical specialty looks, psychiatrists guess.
Well, you mentioned a protein in the morning. And you mentioned your wife is going to be on your PBS special, and your wife's a nutritionalist and has written a bunch of books on nutrition, Change Your Brain, Change Your Body cookbook, and the Omni Diet. So, parents are out, they're busy, they're already working. They have to come home and they might think, well, I need to get this kid protein. Why don't I just stop at a fast food place and grab a hamburger because that's protein?
Diet is just so important. And I think our best testimonials come from fixing people's diets. We actually, Tan is my wife, planted this program into one of the largest drug treatment programs in America. And it's basically clean thinking, exercise, the right diet. The testimonials have just been unbelievable. And these are drug addict, often court-ordered patients. And it's just so exciting when you eat right, you think right. So eating, moving, and then learning how to think in healthy ways can just be so powerful. And then on top of that, if you know which type you have, and then you can target whether it's supplements or medications, it becomes even more powerful still.
Okay, well, you're a psychiatrist, and I was wondering if I could take a moment and play the word association game with you. I'll say a word or a couple words, and you tell me your opinion on them. First word, caffeine.
I'm not a fan. It constricts blood flow to the brain and dehydrates the brain, and people get dependent on it.
Sleep.
I actually think it interferes with the effectiveness of supplements or medications.
Sleep deprivation.
I'm also not a fan of that. Decreases blood flow to the brain. Anything that decreases blood flow to the brain makes you foggy and make more bad decisions.
How about video games?
I think it depends on the kind of video game you play. If you're playing Tetris, that's probably helpful for your brain. If you're playing violent ones that overstimulate you, wears out the pleasure centers of the brain and makes you look more ADD.
Alcohol.
Totally not a fan. Too many people in this country think of alcohol as a health food when people who drink every day have smaller brains. And I always say when it comes to the brain, size matters.
How about putting more pressure on your ADD kid or your anxious kid or your depression kid to do better?
I'm not a fan. If the harder you try, the worse it gets, and then you put them into a pressure cooker, they can get demoralized and then depressed. I think if you notice that pattern, that getting them help is just absolutely critical.
I heard you talk one time, and I wonder if you could relate the story to my audience. You talked about Fat Freddy the Penguin. I wonder if you remember that story, and if you could talk about what you learned about Fat Freddy.
So it comes from a book I wrote called The Most Important Thing in Life I Learned from a Penguin. My son was 7, and he was not easy for me, and I was doing something called special time, which is just spending some alone time with him, and took him to a place called Sea Life Park in Hawaii. It's sort of like SeaWorld. They have sea animal shows, and we went to the whale show, and that was fun, and then we went to the dolphin show, and that was fun. And at the end of the day, he grabbed my shirt and said, I want to go to the penguin show. And I'm like, what's that? He said, Dad, don't you know anything? And I took him to see the penguin show, and Freddy was this really cool emperor penguin. He's about 3 feet tall, and we're sitting in the stadium, and Freddy comes out, and he climbs a tall diving board ladder and goes out to the ends of the diving board, bounces, and then jumps into the water. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, that's so cool. And then he gets out of the water, he bowls with his nose, counts with his flippers, jumps through a hoop of fire. And I'm really focused and intent on my son. He's having so much fun. And then all of a sudden, the trainer asked Freddy to go get something, and Freddy went and got it, and he brought it right back. And in my mind, I went, damn, I asked this kid to get something for me, and he doesn't want to do it. And then he wants to argue with me. And I knew my son was smarter than the penguin. So I went up to the trainer afterwards, and I said, how'd you get Freddy to do all these really cool things? And the trainer looked at my son, and then she looked at me, and she said, unlike parents, whenever Freddy does anything like what I want him to do, I notice him. I give him a hug, and I give him a fish. And then the light went on in my head that even though my son didn't like fish, whenever he did what I wanted him to do, I paid no attention to him at all, because I'm a busy guy. But when he didn't do what I wanted him to do, I gave him a lot of attention, because I didn't want to raise bad kids. So I was inadvertently teaching him to be a little monster to get my attention. And so I collect penguins as a way to remind myself to notice the good things in my life more than the bad things.
Yeah, we seem to just ignore the good things because that's what's expected, and we want to correct the behavior when, maybe you should be the other way around. Give more attention to the good stuff we want to see.
It's so important. We teach parents to be firm and kind. That's really what we're excited about, teaching them to be firm and kind, to clearly notice what you like more than what you don't like.
Well, you have a book, Healing ADD. It's a wonderful book, and it goes through the different kinds of ADD and what's required to help treat each different kind. But you also have this new program, 30-Day Heal ADD Home Kit, and I wonder if you could explain what that is.
I first wrote Healing ADD a long time ago, like 12, 13 years ago. And so much has happened that I really wanted to revise it. And as I revised it, I added type 7. So up until then, we'd always talked about 6 different types of ADD. But we added anxious ADD because, our clinical work just showed us it was really common. And Healing ADD really distills the 30 years of experience I have being a psychiatrist and helping to plant all of the principles in the life. So there's a questionnaire to know if you have it and what type, and then what to do about it. There's also school interventions, there are family interventions, parenting interventions, medications, supplements, alternative treatments for it. So as far as I know, it's the most comprehensive book ever written about ADD. And in the revised version, what I realized is people with ADD won't read the whole thing. They'll read a little bit, and then they'll put it down and get distracted. So I actually started with a starter guide. And the starter guide starts with, I know you're not going to read this book. Read the next 5 pages. And then if you're interested in why you should do these things, then you can read the whole book. And I actually thought that was funny, but it's also really true. So it's very practical. And then what I wanted to do was to show people how powerful it is with diet, lifestyle interventions that you can heal ADD at home in 30 days. So we have developed this program for one thing for you to do each day for 30 days and notice the radical difference that you can make in your life or the life of your child.
That sounds amazing. I mean, if you're on the webpage here, depression180.com/Amen, AMEN, you'll find links to the program. You'll find links to his books, Healing Anxiety and Depression, Healing ADD, Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. Also, the great place to find out more about Dr. Amen is amenclinics.com, and that's clinics with an S at the end, amenclinics.com. And this is a site where take some time to go through it. There's great articles, there's great videos, there's quizzes you can take, tons of information on all this stuff. And, Dr. Amen, I so appreciate your time, and you're doing such great work. And one last quick thing, if this can be quick, but you're actually working with the NFL, the National Football League, here in America. We've read the articles about some of these football players committing suicide, and maybe they're taking themselves out by shooting themselves in the chest so they can preserve their brains because they know something's wrong. And you're working with these guys, and you're having radical shifts, and you're healing these guys after these guys are getting beat up in their heads for 7 years.
we've been working with NFL players for a long time, and initially the NFL was pretty much in denial that they had a problem. But what we've seen is if you make it to the NFL, odds are you have brain damage. And, playing professional football, college football, high school football, is clearly not good for your brain. The exciting news that we have discovered is many of these people have brains that can be rehabilitated if you put them on the right program. And we're very excited about that. You are not stuck with the brain you have. You can make it better, and I can prove it. We've done it over and over again.
And we're going to end at that. What better, more positive statement can you make, Dr. Amen? Thank you so much. I so appreciate you being here.
Great. Thank you so much.
I hope you learned a lot from this interview with Dr. Amen. He's an amazing wealth of information about the brain and healing depression and ADD. As I said at the beginning, this interview comes from a special series on depression I put together called the End Depression Now Telesummit, which features over 40 experts teaching you the facts, exploding the myths, and revealing the scientifically proven methods for eliminating depression. If you'd like more information about this expert series, you can go to Dr. Amen's show webpage at mastermindshow.com/Amen, that's AMEN, and clicking the link on that page. Or just go to depression180.com/telesummit. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next time.